¿Qué pasa, Peila? Aquí Muchamiel. ¿Cuántos datos inútiles sobre el WoW Classic conoces? Vamos a ponerlo a prueba. Dale like y suscríbete si te gusta este contenido, que me ayudas un montón. Y también bajo la descripción tienes el link de Twitch donde vimos esto en directo, pues si te quieres pasar también a ver los streams y ver esto en directo de primera mano. Vamos a ver, 15 minutos de cosas inútiles de Vanilla, del WoW Vanilla, información inútil. 15 minutos, vídeo de Wheeler, lo dejo bajo la descripción por si luego lo queréis buscar vosotros. Del WoW Classic, por supuesto. Vale, vamos a verlo. A ver qué se comenta nuestro colega.
Known things out there in the world of vanilla, world of Warcraft, things which separate.
Decidme las que sepáis de verdad y me ponéis bajo pues un contador. Pues esta me la sabía y estas no, ¿vale? Pues esas movidas.
It from other versions of the game, make it memorable and above all, unique. Vanilla was full of these small RPG aspects which in some cases were planned for the game but never panned out, or just things that one developer one day thought, hey, this will be cool, I'm just gonna go put that in the game.
Lupos, va.
Today I wanted to
Cuéntame
go over
cosas,
some of
cuéntame
them,
cosas.
so hopefully you'll find something new, maybe it'll be a trip down memory lane, and if you want to see more of this type of content, definitely let me know, because vanilla is not short on secrets. With that said, let's make a start. At night, certain locations in the game have their NPCs change between different forms. The first one, which you'll have probably seen, especially if you were playing Season of Discovery during Phase 1, is in Pyrewood Village, a small alliance-friendly.
El Pyrewood Village, el Pyrewood este, es lo que está justamente bajo de... ¿Cómo se llama? No, de Colmillo Oscuro. Lo que hay bajo, que son de niveles 14 de élites.
Town towards the south of Silverpine Forest,
ahí está.
Just near the Grey Main Wall, aka the entrance to Gilneas. It's an elite zone and the
y Gilneas estaría justamente bajo.
Horde have a few quests to go and complete there, but when night hits, the townsfolk transform from humans into bloodthirsty warriors, making them aggro onto both factions. This can be a bit of a shock when you zone out of SFK to go and vendor there, and the vendors are just straight up gone. But this makes a lot of sense for a whole village to turn at night, especially so close to where the Worgen were born. There is also...
Hombre, donde nacen los Worgen son tanto Gilneas como la zona esta de Colmillo Oscuro, entonces es normal que justo la villa debajo, que son élites y tal, cuando sea la noche se conviertan en Worgen. Está muy chulo.
Another place this happens, and this one is kind of random to be honest, and that's the graveyard just next to the entrance.
¿Qué le pasa a este cementerio?
Okay, well it's not actually a functional graveyard, it sends you back to Sentinel Hill, but it sure looks like one. During the day there are vultures there, and at night, for some reason instead there are ghouls. I guess some Blizzard developers thought that this would be a cool change to have, and so they just made it happen. I believe these two places...
Es verdad. O sea, yo he pasado 1000 veces por aquí y a veces habían pájaros y a veces habían esto, pero no me había puesto a pensarlo.
These are the only areas where Blizzard use this mechanic of different mobs between day and night, but I think it's a fun idea and would have made sense in other places too. There is also one item in the game which is only available during certain seasons of the year in real world time, and that is, if you've enjoyed fishing, you'll know,
los calamares.
Squid, available approximately from the...
Estos calamares son unos calamares que cuando los cocinas te dan ciertos buffos, sobre todo para personajes más melee, creo que son agilidad y demás, y son pesca estacional. Entonces, en este caso, cuando tienes unos cuantos meses, que ahora lo dirá aquí, y pues al cocinar estos calamares que solamente se venden, que solamente se pueden pescar en una parte del año, pues puedes pescarlos y otra parte no, pescas otra cosa. Mira, desde septiembre hasta marzo puedes pillar los calamares, que aquí los tienes para poder cocinarlos, y en el otro otra cosa, agilidad, bufo de agilidad. Qué guapo está esto. Entonces, claro, por supuesto con esto ganas un montón de dinero en caso de que los pesques. A partir de marzo el precio sube, porque ya dejan de haber, entonces pues se van consumiendo.
People can really reap the rewards of making sure they've stocked up in the downtime before next season. It's a bit crazy there's actually a usable endgame item that's only possible to get half of the year, but hey, that's vanilla World of Warcraft for you. And people always go out of their way to catch loads because it can be easy money in the long term. In future expansions,
el precio va a subir, porque bajar no puede.
Content only available during certain types of weather. This is particularly true for battle pets, such as the Baby 8 from Jaguaro Isle, just off the coast of Stranglethorn Vale, who only appears when it's raining.
Se aparece cuando llueve.
During sandstorms, or the Arctic Fox Kit during snowstorms and so.
Yo este no lo he visto nunca. Ah, pero esto es Rasganorte. No, pero esto no es el Classic, ¿eh? O sea, así lo he visto y digo, coño, cuna de invierno. Pero no. Estos bichos son de Rasganorte.
on. This is a pretty interesting idea, and there is weather in vanilla World of Warcraft.
Eso está en la parte de arriba de Cumbres Tormentosas, al lado de Uldor, a la izquierda. A mí no me engañan, ¿eh? A mí me pueden engañar de muchas cosas, pero de eso no. Y ese bicho no está en cuna, ese está arriba.
Too. I wonder if someday this kind of mechanic could be incorporated into the game in some way. Next up, have you ever noticed how when you level up in Classic, you get +5 skill to your class's specialization? Sí. As in you're a mage, you'll get +5 skill to Frostfire and Arcane. Have you ever really wondered, why am I getting this? What's this all about? Well, it's a relic of the very old talent and leveling system from earlier versions of World of Warcraft that was scrapped pre-launch. It used to be the case that casting abilities and spell schools would give you skill points similar to how weapon
¿Pero de dónde coño has sacado estas imágenes?
skill works, which could then be used to upgrade certain abilities or stats which your character had. This was much more similar to older RPGs where you could start a character and then build them into pretty much anything that you had the vision for.
No he visto nunca esto,
taking a more class-based approach though, where each one of them would be innately different. So ultimately, this was taken over by the talent system instead, and skill points were left in for things such as professions, weapons, but they were just a metric to improve those stats by, not points you would actually spend.
Hostia.
They did leave your class skills improving in the game as a bit of flavor text to show that your character is growing and improving, and I used to think that this was all there was to say about this stat, but for one class and specialization, their class skill is actually relevant, and improving it does something, and that is of course for feral druids. So in Season of Discovery, Blizzard have put items in the game which increase the power of the feral combat.
Sí, bueno, eso siempre ha estado, lo de aumentar los puntos, todo eso.
Skill, which is equivalent to giving feral extra weapon skill, as
Pero el
can be
combat
seen
3.
here on some re-itemized Molten Core loot. I believe this is the first time ever a class skill has been able to be leveled beyond cap, and maybe there's more room for class improvement through this seemingly flavor-only stat than we thought. Now, throughout vanilla World of Warcraft, if you're a hunter, there is absolutely no doubt.
Pero esa estadística es un poco irrelevante, más que nada porque te aparece ahí, tú no puedes hacer nada con respecto a ella, cuando subes de nivel te dan 5 puntos, y si no subes de nivel, pues no te los dan. Entonces, no es una cosa que tú puedas manejar, o sea, más. Hombre, Broken Tooth es la mejor pet que había en el Classic, que es la mascota que más rápido pegaba, y es un rare que aparece en 3 spots de tierras inhóspitas. Entonces pues tenías que pillarlo y había un Cristo. O sea, yo lo saqué en Season of Mastery y fue un Cristo. Me pagaron unos 80 euros por darle información de cuándo lo había pillado, en qué layer. Una barbaridad.
Especially in PvP, and was reputed for his 1.0 attack speed. This was the fastest attack speed of any pet at the time, and would cause spell knockback to occur on every single attack. Equally, if you were Beast Mastery spec'd, it was very good for frenzy uptime, as your pet was attacking so often, it would be keep.
Y aparte de eso, no solamente con lo de la pet, que esta era la más rápida, sino que tenías que irte, por ejemplo, a VRS o LBRS. No estoy... LBRS. A capturarlo, porque las habilidades del Hunter anteriormente, de la pet, se hacían de forma distinta. Tú tenías que educar a una mascota, pegar y que pegue contigo para tú aprender las habilidades de esa mascota. Con la tortuga aprendías las de tanque, con los gatos aprendías X, tal. Pues el mordisco, que es el bite, que es una con las que más pegas, tenías que, para sacarla en el rango máximo, tenías que irte a LBRS, a pillar la mascota para que te saque el último rango y todo el rollo. Eso es igual, ¿no? Pues eso, sí, eso también. Entonces yo el Hunter no lo he jugado en eso. Yo el Hunter lo jugué en Season of Mastery. Y pues eso, tienes que venir aquí a pillar los lobos negros, que son los que tienen el bocado más leveleado. Si no te subes un lobo de esos, si no lo educas y es para ti, tu esa habilidad nunca tendrías al máximo nivel.
Keeping those stacks rolling. However, there used to be a way more powerful pet in the game, and if you're Alliance, you've probably run past him several times in Duskwood, and he's called Lupos.
El Lupos, era mejor, el Lupos.
BAQ, so quite late in vanilla, this pet used to do entirely shadow damage with their basic attack. Of course, shadow damage would ignore any armor, making him the highest DPS pet in the game by an absolute mile, and he would shred through armored targets in PvP
¿En serio? ¿El Lupos?
It was a very unique pet and the only one that worked this way, but probably too overpowered to be kept in this state, so Blizzard did end up nerfing him to do physical attacks instead of just shadow, and we never saw the shadow damage variation in Classic as we released on the final patch. Now I have a few hidden locations in the game which you may or may not have come across. The first one is in the Hinterlands, and if you're on the Hinterlands side, you'll have ran past Shindigger's camp before if you've done
la parte de arriba.
For Horde, this is a bit more out of the way.
Aquí entregan misiones.
The hill on the way to the camp from the west to the east. If you make a left turn just before you actually get to the camp, you'll see a pass over the mountains into Western Plaguelands. If you start to run up here, it reveals the zone as Plague Mist Ravine, which also makes it pretty obvious on the map when you do so, and it will take you from this place in Hinterlands straight to the outside of Skullomance.
Bueno, sí,
the shortcut is not far off the beaten trail, but it's just so easy to miss that I bet a lot of people don't even know it's there.
Sí, ese es el caminito que te lleva de Tierras de la Peste.
Ander, gracias por el Primol y cómo va todo, Muchamiel.
Ander, jefe, muchas gracias por suscribirte. Te lo agradezco un montón, de verdad. Pues este es el camino que cuando sales de Skullomance hay un caminito y puedes ir justamente por aquí que te lleva de uno a otro, es el más rápido. Tú sí que lo sabía, ¿eh? Muchas gracias por suscribirte, tío, de verdad.
Probably not that often, but hey, maybe this comes in somewhere for someone. There is another super obscure location in the game called Zalashi's Den. Again, you'll have run past this place so.
Simplemente viendo esto, os digo dónde está. Solamente viendo esto. Esto está en Tanaris, pegado hacia la derecha, un poquito por encima de donde están todos los piratas. El túnel que pillas en Tanaris, están todos los piratas, un poquito por encima, hay como una cala, te metes y es aquí esto.
Many times and you'll have no idea it's ever been there. It's a cave just hidden out of sight on the eastern coast of Tanaris, and it's home to a single Naga named after the den himself, Zalashi, who is just kind of there. What purpose is he for? Well, we never really found out. I guess somebody had intentions to use him.
O sea, que esto no sabemos para qué sirve.
For some content or a quest maybe, but nothing ever came to light on what his purpose was. I even found a thread from 2010 of
Esto ni siquiera vale para la misión de Ankiraj. Para la puerta. Hostia, no sabía que no valía para nada, tío. ¿Ves? Está aquí, esto está Tanaris. Está aquí lo de arriba, lo del tal. Pues vienes por aquí y bajo están los piratas. Que aquí ya está, pues. Joder, pues la misión está de matar a los defias estos raros de aquí.
Often the case in future expansions that Blizzard reused vanilla NPCs in one way or another, but Zalashi, who's never really served a purpose, disappeared one day and nothing has ever been heard from him since. Maybe we'll see.
Joder, que me encantaría saber de qué fue esto, tío. ¿Por qué este? Vale, a continuación, antes de que salga os voy a decir lo que es, ¿vale? O igual sale después. Hay un NPC que está por Vega de Tuercespina andando para arriba, andando para abajo, que es un Tauren, ¿vale? Ese NPC, ahora igual sale y lo explica, pero ese NPC era porque a los Taurens se les quería dar la opción de que su montura rápida no fuese un codo de mierda, sino que lo aprendes ahí, en ese tío que sube y baja, y hablabas con él, te enseñaba su montura de los Taurens, que era ponerse a 4 patas y empezar a correr como toros. Pero dijeron que estaba demasiado roto porque no era una montura como tal, y les pusieron los codos. Creo que ahora saldrá. Pues igual sale luego. Y si no, pues ya lo he contado.
You will have done, but I'm not sure if you'll have seen the quest all the way through. See, the start of the quest and the end of it are several expansions apart. So after you kill KT and you get the phylactery, it starts a quest which says, your better judgment dictates that you destroy the phylactery, preventing the Lich from ever reforming. Thankfully, you seldom listen to that internal voice of reason. Someone at Light's Hope will pay you hugely for this artifact. Who cares if Kel'Thuzad regenerates to full power? And so you hop along to Light's Hope Chapel to see if there's any takers for this undead soul of a powerful Lich. And unsurprisingly, there is. And it's none other than the guy that you trade for your priest tier 3, Father Inigo Montoy, who when you hand it over to him appears to be salivating and says you'll be greatly rewarded, give it here now. I mean, you do get a nice trinket to be fair, but our character isn't exactly the brightest here. And as we find out in Wrath of the Lich King, he returns it to Arthas, which enables Naxxramas to be reformed and Kel'Thuzad reborn once again. And as a reward for this, the father is transformed into a powerful Lich himself. I mean, that's the lore reason Naxxramas was brought back. It totally wasn't Blizzard just bringing it back as a freebie because basically no one did it in vanilla. Anyways, we end up meeting Father Montoya in a quest once again in Dragonblight, where we see the Lichis become Thalzan the Duskbringer, and things are looking kind of shaky in our battle against him, but then along comes Tyrion Fordring to save the day. We beat him, and that is that. It's a bit of a long ending to a quest which starts in vanilla, but it is interesting. I guess even back then they knew they already wanted to bring back Kel'Thuzad.
Hostia, curioso, esto no lo sabía, ¿eh?
Next
Vamos, ni de coña sabes esto.
Unused instance portals, which you've almost certainly seen around the world.
Hostia, qué guapo, tío. No sabía esto, ¿eh?
When they were first doing vanilla, and they just didn't have time to finish all of them all the way.
Se me tormenta que no puedes entrar por una de las puertas estas.
Just having those green swirly instance portals behind a set of bars really got the imagination going. And they also left something in the game which maybe Blizzard did get around to using eventually.
Aunque pensaban, pero luego no lo hicieron.
The Storming portal, which was supposedly going to be used for player housing, a feature which was experimented with during the early versions of World of Warcraft.
Hostia,
but ultimately never made
un housing de
it to life.
estos.
In Dark Whisper Gorge, of course, there's the portal to Mount Hyjal.
Pero ultra mal hechos,
A decent amount of work was also done on the mountain too in terms of zone building, environment, and so on. This was a big lore-driven place in the game, so whenever Blizzard ended up getting to use it, it had to kind of be a big deal. But again, it wasn't a zone we saw in vanilla.
Es normal que hubiesen estas cosas, es normal.
Would be in a raid where we travel back in time during the Burning Crusade. And of course, the portal at the end of Strat Undead, the one near where all the undead skeletons run out when you're fighting your way to Baron Rivendare.
A la
This was
izquierda.
going to be the portal to Naxxramas, but again didn't make it to live, and instead you had to pay your way to get teleported up into Nax. Oh, and a bonus thing here, when you zoned into Nax in vanilla, it was a one-way trip. There was no way to leave. There being an instance portal inside a dungeon very much followed how they did Molten Core and Blackwing Lair initially, where similarly those two have a raid portal inside of Blackrock Depths and Upper Blackrock Spire.
Exacto, es muy parecido, para poder entrar, claro.
Naxxramas, they decided, well, we've done achievements anyway, so people don't have to go running through a dungeon.
Era para eso
Let's just
entonces.
not bother
Hostia.
this time. Speaking of dungeons though, despite it being super common for everyone to always take 5 players to a dungeon, the majority of the dungeon content in Classic can take more players than that if you really want to.
O sea que mucha gente no lo sabe, que hay muchas mazmorras de Classic que puedes llevar 10 personas tranquilamente, no tienes por qué ir 5, pero hay un montón de peña que no lo sabe.
As of patch 1.12, the final
Como por
patch of
ejemplo
vanilla,
Maraudon.
there are only 3 dungeons
Tú puedes
in
ir
the
10 personas a
game where you can
Maraudon.
strictly not bring more than 5 players at one time. Those being Blackrock Depths, Strat Undead and Living, okay, maybe those count as 2, and Scholomance. Every single other...
Claro que igual para lootear no te vale. ¿Sabes? Igual para lootear tú no quieres ir con 500 personas o para experiencia, pero sí te vale para sacar las típicas moneditas que hay que sacar en fase 3.
Dungeon in the game could take 10 players. You could do a 10-player Gnomeregan, Deadmines, Zul'Farrak, pretty much everything you wanted, but people never bothered.
Zul'Farrak, no sabía tú, qué locura.
Hard to see why. Being
No sé que no sabía.
affects the experience you receive greatly. You have way more people to roll against for loot, and perhaps biggest of all the quests in dungeons are not possible to complete in a raid group, so really you could bring more than 5, but why ever would you? The exception to this is of course Upper Blackrock Spire, which is the only
Claro, el único que se hace de verdad es en Upper, en VRS.
And there are several reasons why it works.
Porque en 5 es horrible.
To be close to our level cap, so XP isn't quite as highly valued, quests are tagged as raid wide so they can be completed, and well, it's just kind of difficult compared to a lot of other dungeon content. There's a bunch of dangerous mobs and large trash packs, and if you were going in there with 1 tank and 1 healer, it would be kind of challenging, to be honest. And whilst you'd all
Es muy complicado hacer VRS con 5.
started doing it as 10, and that's still the normal way to do it all these years later. And finally, despite the name World of Warcraft, PvP was pretty thin at launch, to be honest, and initially at least it was very much up to players to make their own content within the game. And if you didn't play on launch, you may not remember just how little there really was. There was certainly no arenas, we didn't get those till TBC, there were no battlegrounds at launch, we'd get Warsong Gulch and Alterac Valley
¿Cambiarán si no Discovery? ¿Tendremos arenas? Ojalá.
Sometime shortly after, and then Arathi Basin sometime after that. There was no honor and ranking system, there was no PvP.
Que no había nada de PvP.
There wasn't even a way to queue for Battlegrounds cross-server until the final patch of vanilla.
Era pegarse por pegarse.
If you wanted to do a Battleground back in the day, you had to go over to your Battleground master, queue it up, and you'd have to hope there'd be enough people also queuing.
Chica, eso sigue siendo en el Classic.
It definitely built up rivalries, and PvP was more active back then, especially in the Battleground scene, I'd have to say. But the World of Warcraft...
Pero esto es... esto no es ninguna BG. O sea, esto es majar revolcafango.
When it first released from a PvP standpoint was, I see a red bar on my screen, I'm gonna go get them. And hey, you know what they say all these years later? Red is dead. And sometimes those player-driven rivalries and stories you can make by yourself are more than enough without all the extra content. But anyways, those are just a few obscure or strange bits of information about vanilla World of Warcraft. Despite the game at times showing its age, it certainly was unique in the way that it approached many different aspects of the MMO, and there's a reason we're all still coming back to it all these years later. It's always interesting to try and find that bit of information that I've never heard of before, so if you found
Lo del lupus no lo sabía,
and if you want to see more videos of
Esto
this
sí.
type, definitely let me know.
Esto
as
no
well.
se sabía en
But,
general.
as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.
Bueno, de estas cuantas cosas sabíais. La verdad es que me he dejado un poquito decepcionado. Me esperaba que iba a meterle más detalles muy específicos con respecto a ciertas cosas. Pues esto pasó por esto. Me esperaba cosas mucho más específicas, más que tan largas, porque han sido 15 minutos, pero, tío, pueden haber dicho 4 cosas. En lugar de 15 minutos me había puesto 4 cosas, tal. Me lo ha vendido como que habían muchas más cosas más pequeñas que cosas tan grandes. Me ha decepcionado un poco, la verdad. Muchas de las cosas ya las sabía, un par no, y sobre todo la que no sabía era la que esta de qué pasa con las ramas y que el Kel'Thuzad y que luego van a no sé qué. Me esperaba cosas más pequeñas, más puntuales, más errores, más... Pues que tú vas y aquí te encuentras con esta esfera que te dice no sé qué, o sabías que aquí hay no sé cuántos. Me esperaba más ese tipo de cosas, la verdad me deja un poco decepcionado con respecto a eso. Muchas gracias por ver el vídeo, ponme abajo por los comentarios cuántas te sabías y cuántas no, y si tienes alguna que crees que el resto de personas pues no las sabe. Si te ha gustado puedes darle like y suscribirte, si no te gustó no lo hagas, hay muchas cosas que hacer, como hacer algo que no te guste, pero si ya has llegado hasta aquí pues te ha gustado, así que abajo en la descripción lo tienes todo, y el Discord de Mercado Bascal y de jugadores mando Kir, faremos y se cambio de oro. Muchas gracias por ver el vídeo y ahora sí, corten por favor, corten.